Hello. How are you? I passed this milestone a while ago, but I thought I should mention it again. I've reached 250 subscribers! Okay, it's actually 260 at the moment, but you get what I mean. If you've been following me since October, you'll know that sometimes I post character sheets for my upcoming webcomic. And the first one I uploaded was, for a long time, the most popular video on my channel. I've uploaded 3 more videos like that since, and they've all been met with relative success. So I wanted to go into a bit more detail with how I design my characters. Obviously, this is not a definitive tutorial, but it might still be helpful for you. So if you're interested, make sure to like, subscribe, and strap your butts in, because here we go! In previous videos, I just show the process of working on the character sheets, throwing in a few tips along the way. But I want to go more on the tips and the thought process this time than anything else, while of course still paying tribute to the first character sheet video. And I suppose it's fitting that I talk about my process from start to finish because of the other circumstances surrounding this video. Work on my webcomic has already begun in earnest. Yay. But I realized I had a bit of a dilemma. Long story short, the 2 characters I'm featuring in this video only existed in my head until I put their designs down on paper. So for my 250 subscriber special, I invite all of you to come along with me while I scream internally and suffer the consequences of my actions. All aboard the procrastination train. Destination... I have no idea. So these 2 that I'm designing are 2 of the antagonists in the webcomic, but I'll save all of the juicier lore about them for when I give them a proper introduction. Before I got their designs down, they've spent a long time in my head, and I never got around to drawing their designs until now. But I knew the basics of their design and a few other things that tend to inform my character designs by the time I get to fleshing them out. So let's start at the beginning. Before I get around to drawing a character, a majority of the time I'll have their names down first. Sometimes this informs the choices I'll make later down the production line, but another more major contributing factor is their personality, which also dictates their aesthetic and their color scheme. If a character has special powers, as a lot of the cast of my webcomic does, that tends to contribute to their final design as well. But this isn't always the case. In some cases, however, the major points of their design can contribute to the final decision on what their ability is. Take, for example, this first character that I've designed. His name is Stig, he's tall, and has the personality of a wet cat. I knew from the beginning that he would have a somewhat unkempt appearance and that his color scheme would lean on the darker side, save for a few brighter shades of green. And this was part of the reasoning that made me give him the ability to break liquids down into their most basic components and turn them into poisonous matter, since poisons and toxic matter are usually denoted by the color green. In my production notes for the webcomic, I also wrote that black would be the designated neutral tone for his design. Which brings me to my next major topic. With each character design, I always try to have at least one neutral tone that ties the entire color scheme together. So this may include black, white, gray, brown, or anything close to those. The rest of the color scheme tends to fall into place afterward based on the factors I mentioned earlier. But sometimes I may also get things done with the help of a couple of palette generating websites. There are 2 sites that I really like. The first one is coolors.co, and I will confess I use this site for a few color palettes, maybe. All it takes to generate a color palette is to hit the spacebar if you're on a laptop or desktop. And you can lock certain colors that you want to keep as you keep spamming the spacebar to your heart's content until you get the color combination you want. I won't lie, it's a lot of fun. Please sponsor me. Another cool website that I found for color palettes is Poline. Poline? Help me. Anyway, this website uses polar coordinates to generate its palettes. You can fiddle around with the coordinate settings as you see fit, but there are also many other settings that you can check out too. Here you can see the palette on the far left side of the screen, while the color wheel is on the right. You can also see what the palette looks like right beneath the color wheel as well. I may have played around with this for a few hours when I went on the website for the first time, hee hee. But back to color schemes as they pertain to character design specifically. On the topic of special abilities and/or powers, it's commonplace to see characters with color palettes that complement the specifics of their powers. For example, red and orange color schemes for fire, and blue and white color schemes for ice, and so on. But again, this isn't always the case. I had a classmate in high school who once told me, to paraphrase, if a character's power is of a certain element, then their color scheme must match their power, and said it like it was a hard, fast, and non-negotiable rule. Looking back on it now, and reflecting on his half-baked advice, I am very certain he would have an aneurysm if he saw Charlotte or Kazuha from Genshin Impact, who both have elemental powers that are contrary to their color palettes, at least at a first glance. There are also a few more characters from that game that break this color ability rule, but I digress. But at the end of the day, what really matters is whether or not your character has a cohesive color scheme. Aside from the neutral tone I mentioned earlier, I also like to keep my color palettes rather simple, keeping it to a maximum of 3 or 4 other colors. When I say colors, I really mean hues, since I also like to experiment with different shades of that hue. And different shades of one color are fine to use, at least for me. Once I have a color scheme fully figured out, I try narrowing things down to one main dominant color and having the others take the backseat. This decision was pretty easy in Stig's case, but as for Kypros, the other character I'm drawing for this video, well, actually, he's a bit of a unique case. You'll see in this video that his color palette includes red, white, black, and blue. Black was going to be the designated neutral tone, or at least the one with the greatest presence in his design. But I also decided to challenge myself to incorporate both the red and the blue without having them clash, since I like that color palette for him, and I wanted to use both colors in a meaningful way. Another problem that may surface when designing your characters is applying the colors in a way that keeps things from clashing. I try not to have any clashing colors or colors that otherwise don't go well together in my designs. Also, if two colors that are already in the color palette don't go well together on the design itself, I keep moving them around until I find a combination that works. Some other things I avoid are overly bright colors, including neon colors. I always think about what colors go well together, whether they're complementary colors like red and green or blue and orange, or analogous colors or colors that just match up in another way. In some cases, I also play around with different variations of the same hue. Probably because of my thing for cohesion in character designs. Anyway, I think I've gone on long enough about colors, so it's time to get onto the outfits or designs themselves. If I ever need a boost of inspiration, I go on everyone's favorite reference website, Pinterest. I have a dedicated board for outfits or articles of clothing that I really like, or that I think will inspire a character design later on. In some cases, such as Stig's, I also borrow design elements from older characters that I have, whether they're from abandoned projects or old versions of character designs. The design I recycled in this instance is from a character named Adelaide from an old and short-lived sci-fi project called Analemma. Obviously, it wasn't one-to-one, but I took the elements that I thought would be the most fitting, such as the shape of the sleeves and the general look of the coat, along with the sweater-looking thing going on here. And it's kind of funny because both Adelaide and Stig have a black and green color scheme, and thinking back on it, I think this is what caused me to finally put 2 and 2 together and take some influence from Adelaide's design. I don't know, brains are weird. When designing my characters, I try to make each of them as distinct as possible, at least distinct enough to pass the silhouette test if you were to line them up next to each other. Something that I think of with outfits specifically is that I try to give each character a different look. Whether it's a different coat, a different shirt, and things like that, along with at least one feature that would, again, set them apart if you did the silhouette test. Well, okay, let's ignore my obsession with collared shirts for a moment. Another thing that I think about is the time period I'm borrowing influence from. The general aesthetic of my webcomic takes influence from the 1890s, with a tiny bit of a steampunk twist. Of course, I chose not to go overboard with the steampunk aesthetic, but you get what I mean. If the story takes place in a fantasy world, then I apply the time period rule a bit more loosely than I would if I was doing, let's say, a historical piece, in which case I'd be a lot stricter with the rules. Still, depending on the time period of choice, there are some hard rules that I still follow in regards to fashion. In other words, you won't be seeing a lot of sneakers or exercise clothes when my webcomic comes out. Sorry. Once I pinned down both character designs, as much as I could anyway, it was time to officially get to the drawing board. As you can probably see, I wasn't fully satisfied with Stig's design on the concepts page, so I made some modifications before I began work on his character sheet. Fair warning, I tripped up a few times while I was working on these character sheets, probably because it's been a few months since I worked on the last one. I don't know if it will be so obvious with a time-lapse, but I'm not normally this clumsy or this scatterbrained, I promise. Anyway, during the sketch and line art phase, I used the symmetrical ruler feature on Clip Studio Paint to save time and also to keep the process as hassle-free as possible, barring all the areas where I didn't need to use the symmetrical ruler. The sketch phase took a couple of hours for each character sheet, which kind of unnerved me for some reason. I think my predicament could best be summed up like this. Inside of me, there are two wolves. One recognizes the difference between perfect and finished. The other is a hardcore perfectionist. Then again, I do try to perfect my character sheets as much as possible, since I'm going to refer to them constantly when I draw them in the webcomic itself. You've probably noticed in the concepts that Stig has a couple of vials attached to his belt. I think those are still going to be on his person in the comic because his abilities require it, but for the sake of avoiding any extraneous details, I'm just going to keep his character sheet as is. In the meantime, though, I'll figure out what exactly those vials are going to look like. I think he's probably going to carry 3 or 4 in total. We'll see. You've probably also noticed that in some instances, the placement of colors on the concept design was switched around for the final version. This is usually because I'm not completely satisfied with the color placement and want to do some more switching around before I finalize everything. Otherwise, it was just a matter of transferring colors from the concept to the character sheet by way of the magical, wondrous color picker. Trademark. Making character sheets only takes me 4 or 5 hours in total, since I don't do any shading excluding the eyes, since each character has different coloring styles for their eyes. Something you may have seen if you've watched all of my character sheet videos. Let's look at Aspen, for example. As you can see, he has a flower-shaped pupil, something that sets him apart from, let's say, Safia, who has triangular pupils. The way his eyes are shaded is also different from everyone else's, and no two coloring styles for the eyes are exactly the same, just as no two character designs or color palettes are exactly the same. There weren't really any color adjustments needed for Kypros, aside from the placement of the red and white streaks in his hair, and I also changed the color of his eyes in the concept stages, but there were a couple of design changes. The main one is changing the number of horns he has from 4 to 2. I think by the time I got to his character sheet, I was just like, nah, I'm not partaking in whatever this is, because he'd just be harder to draw. Like I said in a previous video, don't go shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to character designs. But at the same time, I like to find the middle ground between simplistic and detailed. The amount of detail has to be just right, while also taking distinctive details and shapes into account. Again, give them something that makes them stand out. I think another reason why I made more blunders along the way than I usually do is because I'm trying to keep my designs more consistent as I draw each character, or making the character design as accurate to the model as possible. There were times in the past when my model consistency would be all over the place, so I'm trying to be more cognizant of that. You'll also notice that I had to resize the canvas for Kypros' character sheet a few times because, let's be real here, the man is tall. That and I almost forgot his tail. Other than that, however, once I really got into the swing of things, Kypros' character sheet was a breeze to get through. I wasn't actually worried about how both of these designs would turn out and how I'd go about executing them. Again, perfectionist tendencies. But I'm very happy with how both of these designs turned out. Hopefully this gave you some insight into how I design my characters, and hopefully this is the last time I procrastinate like this. Ha 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 ha. But anyway, that's going to do it for this special 250 subscriber special. If you like this video and you want to see more from me, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and also follow me on my socials for extra meme content. I post new videos every other Monday, mostly about art, but sometimes I'll talk about other things that tickle my fancy. And since I've been on the topic of my webcomic this entire video, over the coming months I'll be talking a bit more about that since it's a project that I'm very excited about, and it's also a project that's very special to me. So prepare yourself. Something exciting is coming. Anyway, that's everything I wanted to say. Thanks for watching. Actually, hold on. There is one more thing. This is something that I've been sitting on for a while and have really wanted to do for a long time, but I've decided to just take the leap of faith in the last few weeks and actually force myself to do it, because if I don't do it, this idea is just gonna sit in the dungeon forever. I'm launching an Etsy shop on Friday. I'll be selling all sorts of handmade goods, including jewelry, bookmarks, and more. If you're looking for your next great read, I'm also selling blind dates with books. Partially for the sake of returning to my booktube roots, probably. Maybe. No, yes. But all of these books are in serious need of new homes, so test your bookish luck and check out my store when it launches. And if you're interested, you can follow my shop account on Instagram. Okay, now that's everything. Thanks for watching.